Okay, good evening, good afternoon, good morning from whichever country you're joining us. Welcome. The webinar today is on behavioral safety. And as you can see in the first slide, I've purposely put a part of the bigger puzzle in terms of people. So we'll be going through a lot of discussions in terms of the importance of the session. You can go to next slide. Okay, that's just a bit about ourselves, and Fabian has given us a good introduction. Okay, so why behavioral safety? Over the last 20 odd years, we've had this discussions and reviews on behavioral safety, but still today we still haven't reached a positive point in terms of getting the right behaviors, and the reason for this is we've seen, no matter which country we're in, we've seen our statistics, our performance still lagging behind. Although we claim to have behavior-based safety programs, we have engagement tools, etc. So when we designed, there's actually a training program on behavioral-based safety, and that's been compiled after numerous projects that we've done. So over the last 14, 15 years, we've put together a number of seminars, programs to look at behavior-based safety. So if we go to the purpose of the webinar, we'll look at why behavior safety is important. What is the benefits, or what are the benefits of changing cultures within organizations? The process of effective change, and then we have a bit of a questions and answers. As it's a webinar, I'd like us to have a very interactive session. So you have a chance to actually put through questions, and Fabian is facilitating. If there is a question, you can flag it, and then we'll stop as well. Although we have a questions and answers at the end, I prefer us doing one and maintaining a very interactive session. Fabian, can they see the slides? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, they can.
Okay, so if you go to elements of a successful occupational health and safety management system, you'll see that in blue, we cover the standards, the policies, risk assessments, audits, procedures, engineering controls, and communication. But a very important piece of this puzzle is our people. And over the years, as I mentioned, we've seen that we still haven't included the workforce, our people, in the process. You know, we have lovely documents, we have some beautiful processes within projects, within our production plants, etc. But we still haven't got the right mix of engaging our people. And if you look at the changes from Osha's 18001 to ISO 45001, a key change here is the engagement of the workers. So the ISO 45001 also looks at how you're interacting and engaging your workforce in the entire occupational health and safety process. So this is very key for us in terms of are we including them in the process, or are we just providing lip service? Now, if you look at the next slide, achieving occupational health and safety improvement, you'll see there's a stepped process in terms of working your way towards a strong culture and having, I call it intervention and observation programs, okay? And this includes a variety of areas in terms of your training matrix, your training needs analysis, based from your observation program, observation and intervention. How are you recognizing your teams, or are you just providing recognition to some of the guys that are, for example, your leadership teams? Do you include your supervisors, etc., in the recognition? And do you include your workers, including your contractors? How is your program owned? Is it a top-down, bottom-up approach, or is it just a bottom-down approach? And when you've reached this type of culture, then you can lean and you can actually see the benefits of having this program. And as we had in our previous webinars, a lot of the presenters spoke of in terms of return of investments. And this is key, where you find that buying in from senior management is a lot more easier. And 99% of the time, when you have a strong culture and behavior within the organization, selling safety, you actually don't even need to sell safety because it's part of your culture. Okay. So what is an occupational health and safety culture? There's a lot of discussions, dialogue around this, where it's the behavior and beliefs and values of a group of people. And the key word here is the values, not priorities, as most organizations will present. Many managers, even the CEOs, you'll hear them talking of safety being a priority. This message is then cascaded down to others, and priority shift. So for example, as we've seen with COVID-19, our priorities have shifted from an occupational health and safety structure to a occupational health, which we've ignored safety because it wasn't one of our priorities. And this has resulted in a lot of substandard acts, substandard conditions, and has led to some serious incidents, and in some areas, serious fatalities and significant property damage incidents. Also, it's accepted by people in terms of an occupational health and safety culture. When you talk of a culture, it's a way of life. And in some organizations, they've actually managed to get these two right, where there's buy-in from even at a contractor, subcontractor level. So it's accepted. It's something that you don't need to work hard at. And this allows you to focus then on improving or having continuous improvement programs, and you're not doing firefighting. So these are just some of the benefits of an occupational health and safety culture. It's also very important to look at successfully implementing a culture change. Okay, so there's basically 6-step approach. You'll have dissatisfaction, you'll have management buy-in, you'll pick and choose your champions, and I'll go through this shortly in terms of why it's important to have champions. Staff buy-in you keep it alive. And this has been one of the key areas in terms of when we haven't got the culture change right within our organizations. Fabian, I can't see your slides at the moment. And I'd like us, if you could just put the one slide up now. And that's the slide on where are you. Okay. And this is an important area for us to look at there. So I'd like to give us, if you are taking notes, this presentation will be shared, but it's important to ask yourself, where are you as an individual within your organization, and where do you find your organization right now? So you'll find it's a step process. So you'll start off in terms of awareness, there's recognition, and it goes all the way where you reach a culture group. Okay, so that's right at the top. Most organizations we worked with and are still working with, unfortunately, are at a shift stage and management support stage. They haven't fully matured in terms of an organization. Okay, so this is very, very important. Do we have any questions to date or for now?
Any questions so far, everybody?
And now why I've stopped at this stage here, just to look at discussing where are you? Where do we find ourselves right now in terms of the various tiers, in terms of being a low risk or high risk organization, or a high risk, low risk individual?
So maybe I'll just jump in with one comment from my side as well. Yes, Saide. Yeah, we also had a similar experience. So we did a DuPont survey a few years back, which is a cultural survey to identify where the company is, based on the Bradley curve, looking at dependence, interdependencies, etc., to identify where we were at the time when I was at Linda. So yeah, it's very important to know where you are within your organization, and there's some good examples of cultural surveys, etc., that are out there that can also help you to get a good barometer of your organization as to where you at, especially from the perception of your people, which is also important. So just my comment regarding this as pertaining to where you at or where you are.
Beautiful. Thanks, Fabian. Anybody else? And there's no right or wrong. So remember, when you're talking of culture and behavior-based safety program, you have to be very open and transparent. I think, as Fabian highlighted, most organizations seek help after a traumatic or significant event, which, and this is sometimes very unfortunate, where you should have this process within your organization. So I'm still going to wait before we proceed in terms of, I'd like to hear from those that are attending. I see we have 6 participants in the team, with the exception of myself and Fabian. Anybody else? Fabian, I think also they're on mute. Okay, so
Everybody, I think just
Yeah.
unmute yourselves, please, if you'll have a comment pertaining to this point. I think Saide's trying to get a point across from all of us to identify where are we based on our cultural perspective of the organizations. What can we say? Where are we? Are we a top-down approach, etc., as he's been mentioning? So can we have a few comments from you guys pertaining to what your perceptions are, where you're at as an organization, and I promise you, your companies won't fire you if you let us know where you're at.
Yeah, and you don't need to mention your organizations. Yeah? This is one of the beauties of having a strong culture within the organization. So as an individual, I can speak freely, I can speak openly, but for this platform, as an individual, guys, I'm currently in management support stage because of XYZ. And or I'm in the accountability stage. Okay, so remember, there's no, for example, rights and wrongs. It's a good starting point to say, hey, we at this point. As an individual, I'm at that point. As an organization, you can even see the difference. Maybe you are still in an awareness stage, or you could be in a management support stage and your organization is still in awareness stage. So, and this is why I want you to get some input from you guys that are attending. I'm going to proceed. We'll go back to the elements of a successful OHS management. That's the next slide. Okay, and it, sorry, somebody had something to say?
Sorry, Damien Rana here.
Yeah, Damien.
Hi. So just a general comment from my side.
Yeah.
Safety culture facilitator who does a lot of work through workshops and so forth. My experience is that it's still very much in silos when it comes to safety. Meaning that not everybody knows where they fit in or believes that they actually fit into the cycle. For example, the safety or the safety program is just part of the curriculum, as in compliance. The man on the ground believes that everything belongs to the safety professional. Management believes it belongs to the safety professional, but the guys on the ground don't fully understand that they have also a part to contribute to the safety efforts as well, and getting everybody to understand that, where do I fit in when it comes to safety, because safety is about all of us, every single one. And what is my part? For example, leadership, you have to drive that culture of safety. That's where it's actually built. At the same time, getting people on the ground to fully understand where they fit in and understand why these things need to be implemented. So I just think that silo mentality as well with regards to where does safety sit, still sometimes exists.
I love the comment in terms of one recognizing, Fabian, if you can just go to that previous slide in terms of where are you? Okay, so for example, from your comment, you'll find that right now, the organization you described is still in awareness mode. Okay, and the reason why I'm saying it's still at that level, even though it may have all the responsibility documentation in place, which I'll go through at our next. There's no buy-in. And early on, I mentioned that this was one of the reasons why you'll see the transition from OSHA's 18001 to ISO 45000. One of the key components or the changes is worker representation and worker dialogue. So any organization that doesn't have a inclusion, and in South Africa, for example, there's health and safety reps functions, there's responsibilities for that, but it's still not fully inclusive. So as you mentioned, and I must say, a lot of the blame also rests with safety professionals. And I'll tell you why. A lot of organizations that I've worked in and worked with, the safety professionals actually have created silos, and it's more like job preservation. Okay? So by having this silo mentality within the safety field, we've created a bad vibe even amongst management, the workers, etc. That's one. And then secondly, by management not fully understanding their roles, their responsibilities, the return of investment on having a strong safety culture, right? This is why you'll see there's this major gap. But it's very important, and I must say kudos to you for recognizing this. Another area also is that you mentioned is in terms of workshops, and one of our slides, Fabian, if you don't mind, if you can just go to slide 8. Okay, so and I'm focusing on this comment here because it's very important. When you are looking at a behavior-based safety program, your perception surveys are very key, and this will establish, for example, who are your key players, within your organization, and these can be champions. So your stars, your knights in shining armor, as some of them are called, they have to make sure that the inclusion is both from top down and bottom up. And you also have got guys that are players, people that want to see things happen. However, within our organizations, we also have two types of people as well. They are well poisoners. So these are people that no matter how strong you want to deliver on, no matter how positive the environment is, these are people that only talk negative. Okay, and in your surveys, etc., this is the message that, or these are the type of people you need to target. There's also some that are the walking dead. And I'm not talking about COVID-19. I'm talking about people that just come in just to clock in their card, clock out their card. Okay? And in our categories, these are people that are very incident prone as well, the walking dead. Okay? So I like your comment, and that's why sorry? That's why I've jumped to this slide. Anybody else? Anybody else? Fabian, let's go back to slide 6. Okay, so as I mentioned there, within your behavior-based safety program, you'd look at, I call them substandard conditions and behaviors. Most people call them unsafe act and unsafe conditions. But within our organizations, you have standards. And if somebody is not complying with the standard, that's whether it's a substandard act or condition, it should be recorded like that. So when you're looking at your standards, you're looking at how can you improve these standards, including policies. What are your policies? How are they communicated? How are they engaged? Now, just click one more on this. So throughout our organizations, if you look at our behavior-based safety system, we tend to focus on also negatives of people. Okay, so these are the elements of a successful occupational health and safety management system, which will give you a very strong safety culture within your organization. However, as we saw in the steps in terms of where we are, we don't fully understand in terms of the continuous improvement cycle. So a lot of the organizations and a lot of the people within these organizations will have all the fancy frills. They'll have all the nice certificates. They would have done all the workshops. People would have signed attendance. But they haven't fully got the understanding right. Okay? So our job within the behavior-based safety is to look again at how people are impacting on the other elements within our occupational health and safety management system. You'll also see at the next slide, there's a section called continuous improvement, right? And a lot of our organizations don't fully understand continuous improvement. Okay, so it's a part, or a very important part of the behavior-based safety process, but it's also an important part for raising or the standards within your organization and getting to a culture and positive behavior within the organization. We can skip the next slide. You can go to typical data trends. Yeah. So one of the next points I like to when I'm doing the training is to look at typical data trends from your behavior-based safety program. And again, now I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask for a discussion around typical data trends. One, how many of us are actually reviewing this, and what are we doing following the review? So it's open to discussion. Anybody? We seem to have a very quiet group, eh?
Hi there. This is Himesh Dulab. I'm currently based in Qatar, originally from Joburg.
Ah, good. I'm also in Qatar, yeah? So send me.
Oh, you're also in Qatar. Oh,
yeah.
Great. I'm at Qatar still at the moment.
Ah, good, good.
Okay, so
Well,
just
Alex,
my comments on the data trends. So I think if I can comment from our company's side is that the management is very focused on this type of trends. And basically we have a bi-monthly meeting with top management. That's the chiefs and the MD and CEO. And this type of data is presented at these meetings. But further to that, we've got quite a good structure in terms of HSE, where we've got a BBS specialist and we've got a HSE trainer, and all of these guys form part of our team. So how we tackle these points is on a weekly basis, depending on the type of incidents we have, is that these are communicated through a safety bulletin. And these safety bulletins have to be discussed at every shift during their toolbox talks. So I think it's actually very valuable that we analyze this type of data.
Okay, so what data do you all analyze? Lagging or leading?
Both. So we, on a Monday morning, they have a weekly management meeting in which I have to prepare a one-pager kind of thing, with both leading and lagging indicators.
Okay.
So yeah, both have been monitored. We've got quite a good system that we use that's based on the oracles, which was also developed by DuPont. So yeah, it's quite a in-depth system, so we can really drill down into the data.
Okay, so a very important one here is leading, lagging, both are discussed.
Yes.
And I'm not only asking you, I'm asking the group as well. I appreciate your inputs. What percentage are we looking at leading indicators? What percentage are we looking at? So for example, my typical data trends, right? PPE issues, potential for cuts, abrasions. If you have any others, you can share with us. This is for everybody. But what are the typical data trends from a leading point of view that you're looking at? And I haven't included some of them yet.
Okay, so from our perspective, Saide, from a lender perspective, a big focus on the trends is on safety dialogues, safety inspections done by management supervision, etc., attendance in safety walks, attendance in weekly safety meetings, participation in investigations, etc., especially from senior management, middle management where required. So our scale is tipped heavily on leading indicators from lenders' perspective of how they've focused their KPI system and the leading and lagging indicator. So data is tipped more onto the leading indicator side of it. The lagging also plays a part. It definitely does, but not as big as the leading indicators. Also from a quality perspective, when they look at lead safe engagements or lead safe dialogues that are conducted, there's a quality check that's done at the end of it. So there's a scoring for every manager that they have to score a certain amount of lead safe engagements, attendance in meetings, etc. And if they don't meet the criteria, then obviously the higher management start contacting them and saying, hey, why have you not done what you're supposed to do, etc. So there's a very big drive when it comes to the leading side of the organization compared to the lagging. But definitely our lagging is there for the statistical information, for trend analysis, identifying areas of focus especially for the coming weeks, etc. And if I have to look at the typical data trends from what you've indicated here, a lot of the findings are more on PPE issues, on many at the times that we identify, and housekeeping are two of the main ones where I always see that they're always the highest. And then you always get a other category, which includes a lot of the other aspects that are not necessarily included within the trends that you've identified or the information of the deviations you've identified at the bottom. And that's also normally the highest, which I always fight about, because I believe that to pinpoint or hone into the specifics, we need to know what are the other issues that needs to be focused on, which could sometimes be a high area and sometimes goes missed below the radar. So just some of my comments.
And this is spot on, and I like your comments in terms of the PPE and the housekeeping side, where it's so easy, whether you have a card system or electronic system, it's a very easy approach. Now, one of the observations I had I did a 12-month project that focused on turnarounds. And these were common observations made. So firstly, it's an easy find. If you look at PPE, I don't even need to talk to people on PPE. I just can sit and write my card or do my inputs if it's an electronic system.
True.
the important part is, if you have for 2 months consecutively a high observation rate on PPE and housekeeping, you have a major challenge in terms of, one, people not fully understanding the system, two, buy-in from middle management and the workforce. Okay, so what we did is we took 3-year trending data, and we analyzed the data in terms of which areas, and to be fair, we didn't do justice in terms of the education side, in terms of those that are actually out there doing these observations. Okay, one of the challenges on one of the projects also, one of our KPIs were numbers in terms of our observation intervention program. Okay, so if what we noticed for one of the quarters is that we typically had high PPE, high housekeeping trends, but when we further dug deeper, these were filled in by HSE officers one. And this is an important part of your data trends. So one, who are the ones contributing to most of your observations? Fabian, and I think you hit the nail on the head, where management now review at a very high level in terms of, you know, Saide, you were supposed to have done 2 inspections. You're supposed to have attended at least a minimum of 2 safety walks a week. And if it's not done at that level, your whole program of behavior-based safety is actually just a tick-the-box program. Okay? But I'd like to hear from others that are attending. So we've had 2 responses. Thank you very much. From the other guys, in terms of the data, the typical trends. I think everyone is very afraid to talk up here. Guys, this is all, it's an in-house discussion. So as I said, you don't need to mention your organization. By us doing this webinar, we're also looking at internally ourselves and where do we need to improve. So while we're on the typical data trends, and if you guys are making some notes, a key area for successful implementation of a culture change is measuring your success. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, what are our key safe behaviors? I'm a big believer if you want to create a strong culture, not just a safety culture, but an organizational culture of change, you have to start praising people more than screaming at people. The more you recognize people for safe behaviors, it has a major change in behaviors, but also buy-in, communication is improved, etc. And this is where your champions come in. We did a project in 2001 in the Caribbean, in an area called Point Lisas in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago. And we had what was known as a SHOT program, which is, you'll get these various terminologies, BBS, SHOT, Be Safe, DuPont program, STOP, right? But the examples of this was champions were identified, and I think the guys at Qatar Steel have a very similar system in terms of having champions, etc. But I'd like you guys to focus on safe behaviors. a lot of the data that I've been privileged to look at over the last few years, I would say 80% is lagging data. And we need to make a major shift change. In the Caribbean, we actually saw a major rise in terms of site participation, so site engagement in the process. We were very active in terms of sharing this data. So we didn't have, for example, flyers. We actually physically went and we spoke to the teams. We also looked at, in terms of where you have different nationalities. So on one of our projects in Qatar, where we did a massive project for 4 years, LNG project, we actually had dials. So for example, smiley boards, dials, and I can share this with you guys. This allows immediate communication with the teams. So if you did a safety walk and inspection in the area, you'd actually put smiley boards at the categories that were identified. And most of our focus was around changing that culture of engagement and looking at key safe behaviors, where we started recognizing people for working safe, etc. As I mentioned, feedback from safe visits and self-observations. A lot of us are big in collecting data, but we don't communicate effectively. And for us, this was a major lesson on a number of projects. So on the large project that we went, we had some 44 nationalities. And unfortunately, some of these guys came from rural parts of India, Bangladesh, Nepal. So they both reading and writing skills were low. By having these pictorials of the current status, they could actually relate to it and communicate and improve. What was also important is, based on your trends, is revisiting your surveys. So Fabian, you did mention that you guys did do surveys, right? And an important part of this is communicating to the troops, to the work at the lowest level of your organization. And I'm not talking in terms of, I'm talking even as far as your subcontractors that are doing housekeeping, cleaning, etc. Because it's important to engage the lower tiers, your subcontractors as well. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a summary in terms of the benefits of having a strong, and I need to add that word in here, strong behavioral safety program, is one, you'd have an improved safety culture. And back to one of our projects that we did, we had a very strong safety performance in terms of raking up at least 4 or 5 million man hours a week, that because of the amount of workforce we had. And our program was based, unfortunately, on these type of performances. So for example, if you look at typically large projects, you work on frequency rates, you look at days worked without a lost time incident, and everybody starts clapping. You know, you have a massive celebration around 50 million man hours, and all it takes is you have one serious incident or you have a fatality, and it changes the whole environment of the organization. So for example, some exercises, if you look at NASA, for example, NASA had one of the best safety records until they had major disasters on I think it was the Space Shuttle Columbia, and there's another incident that they had where they had to go deep and look at where do we need to improve on our safety. The other example in terms of safety culture was BP. So BP, one of the top-notch organizations in the world, Deepwater Horizon, they just had a visit from senior management. The visit was a major success on paper. And following that, they had one of the biggest disasters. Okay, so why I'm raising these points is culture is not just about tick the box. It's about how you feel, how people feel within the organization. And it comes back to the next point. Had persons taken responsibility and been accountable, you would not have had BP, you'd not have the Space Shuttle Columbia, you'd not have had the Bhopal incident. Okay, so these are some significant incidents, and why I purposely look at these incidents. Following these incidents, organizations actually closed or they revisited their models on occupational health and safety. Okay, the other element is around improving morale, and as I mentioned, one of our projects we had, we were very positive in terms of our performance. We had a very strong lagging indicators in terms of frequency rates. We had successful milestones in terms of LTI-free days, LTI-free months. But when we did a independent assessment, and we used a third party for this, we found that we had a major disconnect in terms of morale, in terms of engagement of our programs, in terms of a two-way process. Okay, so this is very important in terms of strengthening your organization. So make sure your subcontractors, your lower tier contractors are all part of this process. Okay, and one of the successes was a return of our investment in terms of safety. So we had a pool of money for the project, and this has stuck with me from then, where when you have this pool of money, also you focus on critical elements in terms of getting through the process without looking at highlighting significant changes. So for example, worker welfare. How are you engaging on worker welfare? PPE, Fabian mentioned a very typical one on PPE. And the exercises, two very key exercises we had. One was on eye protection. And this was also in Mozambique, where when we surveyed data from our observations, we found that people weren't wearing eye protection or weren't wearing it correctly because it wasn't the right type. Okay, so in some parts of Africa, you get people with a very unusual nose bridge. It either can be large, it can be sharp, etc., depending where you are. By us doing this review, we then were able to influence management on actually supporting a review of PPE. Eye protection was one of them. We then got funding for eye protection and provided people with suitable eye protection. The second review that was done on PPE was the workforce were afraid to say they had eye problems. Okay, so a guy would wear a pair of specs like mine, and typically in areas it'd actually be moving there, but these were taken as observations. And I'll come back to this as well after this. The other one was around hand protection. So we did a hand protection study, and we found that gloves that were issued didn't afford the guys sufficient protection. So within the various crafts, we looked at a hand survey where we had a hand chart. And if you look at certain nationalities, their hands are a lot smaller than normal, than others. Some are larger, okay? We then also put money into our program for hand protection, where we actually got service providers to provide us. And that's where you'll see a lot of these new type of gloves that are coming out now in the market. So where you can have, for example, protection for crush injuries. So these have all come out of studies when you've done your formal reviews, and then you've actually gone back to the drawing board saying, hey guys, what is our areas? How can we influence? This has resulted in, as I mentioned earlier, a reduced cost on, for example, PPEs. It has had significant improvements on downtime, because the minute you have, if you have a fracture or if you have a significant incident or fatality, your projects are shut, or whichever locations you are working, whichever countries, you normally get influence from HSE, Osha, or even the various ministries, where they can actually physically shut you down for a period of time. So these are just some of the benefits of implementing a behavior-based system. Any questions on this? Hello? Anybody there?
Anybody else has anything to comment on this? Okay, Saide, let me just jump in one more time. So I've seen the benefits of a behavioral-based safety program, and the good thing about the current one that I'm utilizing now with Linda is it's linked to a coaching approach. So it's not just about the cultural aspects and behavioral coaching, it's also broad spectrum coaching, looking at people, considering the goal, the current realities of what they have, what they're faced with the activities that they're performing, what are the options to get it done the best way, and obviously what will they do at the end. So we work with the GROW model approach as well. So all of these we've seen a positive trend, and it's definitely something that adds a lot of value, and it definitely improves morale. And we've seen the downward spiral from an incident perspective, even within the company. For the past 2 to 3 years, they had 0 LTIs for quite a long time, and then the LTI started picking up again. But obviously due to other aspects as well that also created those issues. So, but all in all, I'm definitely a ambassador for behavior coaching, behavior-based safety approaches, and I've seen the impact of what it can have within an organization. I've also seen the bad parts of it. I'm not going to mention a company's name that I worked with them on 2 projects, quite a big company, well known in South Africa for their behavior-based safety approaches, or their programs that they've run in some of the mines, etc. And one or two of them when I was working at Murray and Roberts. But I wasn't very impressed with what the concept was and what the guys were actually doing with their champions and things like that. So for me, I've seen, as I say, I've seen the negative side of behavior-based safety and how it shouldn't be done. And I've also seen the right way of how it should be done. And I'm not saying that this way is the perfect way, but it's one of the better ways that I've seen so far. So that's just my comments regarding this.
No, and that's very strong, Fabian. I appreciate it. One of the challenges you would have in most organizations is when it's a very strong top-down approach. I won't mention, I had a 9-month stint on a platinum mine in South Africa. And having just come off a project in the Caribbean, I was actually alarmed by the HSE and how they had created silos. So, for example, the HSE individual was a very strong person in terms of approach, in terms of communicating out, and they used that to their advantage. I'll never forget that we attended we were the consultants, and we attended a meeting, and after the meeting, I asked that this individual stay behind with their mine management. And I said, you cannot talk down to individuals. You should actually have an approach where, people should be free to say, guys, we're not satisfied with X, Y, Z. And it was more tick the box, collecting data, showing management all the nice to haves. And they just had I think it was 2 burn incidents where there was acid, there was a leak on a weld, and they had a guy that opened a valve without proper, lockout, tagout systems. And this wasn't even in their meetings. And it's very important that we also, when we are having all the nice stuff taking place, we dig deep for continuous improvement. And I appreciate that. Anybody else?
Maybe just a comment from my side as well.
Yeah.
Again, based on my experience as well. All 4 of those points I believe is on point. That's something that I stand by, something that I live by. Particularly to highlight improves morale. So, getting people together into a room and discussing things openly and honestly. Firstly, you have to create that safe environment. So that is already a challenge. But you must be able to create that safe environment where people are open and free to speak. But just added to that, having the workforce in the same room as management as well, already you're already heading in the same direction, because some of the guys on the ground are never invited into boardrooms or meeting rooms. Just having a cup of coffee and a sandwich with management in that room does wonders already, So that it just says that I am important, and letting them speak openly says that my voice does count, my opinion matters as well. So that definitely does improve morale. And if you've got a positive environment, you are more likely to have a safe environment as well. Perhaps just to comment on Fabian, listening to what you were saying as well, man, regarding that, the different systems and so forth. I think some of the challenges around there is perhaps a confusion between trying to control behaviors and influencing behaviors. Now, I believe that safety culture is influencing behaviors, which is much harder, but the most effective way. And some organizations try to control behaviors, and that definitely doesn't work.
No. You've made a very good point here in terms of influencing behaviors. So if you don't have the influencing side, and there's 2 elements to influence. One, in fact 3. One, lead by example. So if you don't have this within your organization, you're going to constantly have the stick method where you're going to be beating people up, and you're going to have a carrot method, which is also not very good in terms of morale. So the minute your carrot's old or your carrot's not looking favorable for the guys, you're not going to have this balance. The influencing side also comes in terms of your actual programs. And I'll be honest there, a lot of the programs being sold are not looking at observation and intervention. They're basically looking at observations, right? And this is a study we did there. So we were also laxy-daisy in terms of we had people doing observations. We had a culture of people being afraid to speak up. We had this where if I'm a craft worker, I can't communicate with the supervisor or foreman. Okay, so how do I influence safe behaviors? If for one I have a caste system, so I'm from some deep area in India, or if I'm from a different culture in Africa, or wherever, I can't communicate at that level. Okay, and you have to break this down. And one of the projects where we actually made ornaments, camel on the table. It was one of the projects in Qatar, where if you have a camel on the table, you're actually free to talk as you like. Of course, having respect for each other, etc. But nothing was barred from the discussion. This influenced behavior in terms of being open, transparent. We also created this now at site level, where we could actually, we did some key role models there, where, for example, even myself, I went to site without my hard hat and glasses, right? And we had guys actually stopping us saying, hey, you don't have your glasses on. And this guy was immediately recognized with a phone card or some type of recognition. We immediately brought in, where for example, that intervention at a worker level was recognized. And I'm just giving this as an example, which is very, very important. And I like your point where we haven't fully matured as organizations in terms of recognizing that influence is a major part. Anybody else? Anybody else?
I think just one last comment from my side, and then I just wanted to show that sample of that Bradley curve for those that might never have seen it before.
Excellent.
And go into the quick discussion on that silo, what Damien had also mentioned as well. One last point is that a lot of the time you find that with these behavior-based programs and things that the companies are implementing, they reach a point of plateauing where they are no longer as effective as it was, let's say, in the first or second year of implementation, especially on long-term projects. So it's also good to identify ways and means of twisting it up a bit or making it a little bit more fun and interactive and those kind of things, that it doesn't become the monotonous, boring approach of what I've also seen from some of the behavior-based programs that have been utilized in the past. So I think it's also important that you identify that point of plateauing within the organization, and then you got to now change the approach a bit again, so that we don't keep that stagnation as well within the programs. So that's just a comment that I've identified through these behavior-based programs as well, that eventually they reach a point of plateauing if they're not tweaked from time to time and made a little bit more interesting, or considering the current changes within the industry at large, so looking at the current situations and how can it be adapted, how can it be improved, so that you don't get that point of plateau.
And Fabian, that comes also to continuous improvement. So
Yes.
one of the key parts of continuous improvement is having a third party as part of the process.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
and we found this the hard way where, for example, for 2 years, we actually had good performance. When we had a independent third-party organization that came in and did a culture check, we got a culture shock.
Yeah, that's true. Very
Yeah.
many times it's very
Yes.
true.
Hi, sorry, can I just get in there?
Yes, you
Yes.
may.
Yeah, I think we actually at that stage where it seems like we've reached some sort of plateau, because when you do your safety walk, or if you just analyze the data on a weekly basis to check what sort of observations guys are loading, it's now sort of become like a checklist kind of thing, that tick, I've done it for the week, kind of thing. So just to give you an example, just from this last 2 weeks, we getting observations like, oh, the water bottle fell over the table, that kind of thing, and then they rate it as high. So then when you go back to the guys and find out, and these observations are coming from senior management, not even your ground level type of guys. And then, like I said, when we go back to find out what's the reason of loading such observations, it seems like people are just loading now for the sake of it, so that they meet their KPI for the week. So yeah, I think we need to get in a third party to intervene at this point, because I think we've reached a plateau.
But that's a positive, and what we saw so on two sides, one with projects and with shutdown turnarounds. You'll find when you include KPI for observations, you have to mention interventions. So don't leave it. If I'll share my email with you, if you have an observation intervention program, you'll actually see the process change now, where there's more dialogue than just an observation. Okay. Secondly, a lot of these organizations don't actually look at the quality, they're looking just at numbers. Or on one of our projects, we had a similar scenario where we had something like 250,000 observations. And this was linked to our key KPI for the project. So we didn't celebrate frequency rates, we didn't publish days worked without LTIs, etc. We focused on observation intervention processes. And after 2 years, we also hit a plateau where guys now, they ran out of juice, or they found it, and when we started doing a more strong quality check with a feedback report to the teams, the guys actually saw, hey, this is not just the tick the box process. But yes, getting a third party in is important, and maybe just to do a cold eye review or a gap assessment in terms of your process. Good point.
Very true.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate your comments there. All right, so can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, can you make it bigger? That's it.
We'll have to go side to side, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. No, it's fine.
Okay, so just quickly, this is the Bradley curve, the DuPont Bradley curve, that speaks about reactive dependence, independence, and interdependence. So the idea is that every organization should be at a level of interdependency where they are not operating within silos, which Damien mentioned. Each department, every manager, etc., operates in their own little ivory tower, etc., which it should not be. So there should be a linking, a cohesion between all the departments. Everybody should be working towards the same goals, the same objective within the organization. So that's where majority of companies, to be honest, the big companies as well, when you find that when they've conducted the surveys, they are sitting within the independent and not the interdependent where they should be. So just a point that I wanted to raise regarding the Bradley curve, which also gives you a good indication about your safety culture of your organization and your maturity level of your culture and your safety environment as well. So that's all from
Fabian, sorry. Just a key part on this here. It's important that when we're using such reference documents, that we also be transparent within our organization. So a lot of these organizations that are showing very high success and they are audited from independents like DuPont, etc., are still seeing significant incidents, but for luck, or observations that, but for luck, it wasn't a fatality or a serious incident. So it's very important that we look and be very open and transparent.
That's true. That's very true.
And a lot of us are working at a engineering or client level. The key part of this is that we should be having dialogue at the contractor level. Okay?
Yes.
That's very, very important. Because we as an organization, we could be at a very strong level, but our contractors are lagging. And because of certain restraints, etc., they don't have the budgets that we have. You know, when I call myself we, I'm talking about some of the clients. You know, yes, so for example, if you're working on a oil and gas petrochem site, you'll have a very strong budget to implement some of these. You know, but if you're working on a road project or construction, non-oil and gas, this is where it's actually lost. So we need to raise the bar within our organizations. You know, good. Okay.
Thank you very much, Said. Is there any questions at this time? Any other comments before we close?
Good stuff.
I see no hands going up. Vinod?
Yes, sir. Nothing to comment, sir, but it is a very fantastic session. And I have to appreciate Mr. Damien for his very beautiful comment on how we have to include workers in group meetings.
Yes,
yeah,
that's very true.
Once I come to work, I will definitely include workers at least once. I will talk to them, and I will try to include our safety manager.
Thank you, Vinod.
This will,
we hope to see your safety manager should be there.
Yes, sir. Yes.
No problem.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else before we close?
Excellent, okay. Fabian.
Nobody else. Thank you very much. Thank you, Saide Mansur, for an excellent session. Thank you, everybody that interacted and engaged. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you all at the next one. All right, so the invites will go out soon. Hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much. HSE Connection Point, you always connected. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.